What's up, YouTube? What's up, YouTube? It's your boy back with another one. People, in today's video, we want to look at a very contentious topic or an issue, which is free education in South Africa. Is it feasible or is it not at all? Is this just a pipe dream? Let me know what you think about this topic in the comment section below. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel. You know hate speech is always welcome. Hello. Phew, man. People, free education in South Africa. Is that a possibility ever? Was it a possibility before? And can it be a possibility in the future? Now, what does it take to give a country or a country's youth free education? Right? It's because it's easy to shout from rooftops, hey, we need free education, we need free education, we need free education. What does it take for a government to deliver free education? That's my whole point. I mean, surely certain sectors of society deserve free education. Does the economy, does the GDP, does the budget allow for blanket free education across the board? Now, if you tell me rural schools and township schools should be free, I can totally agree. Totally agree. I mean, as it is, government schools, those township schools, look from the outside, they look like they are free because the fencing is broken, windows are busted in, this and that. It doesn't even look like there's any sort of maintenance going on. So it looks like a free school. It looks like a free institute of nothingness, right? Even the way the kids are dressed going to school, it looks like there's no checks, like what happens in some other countries. Before you line up for assembly, they check that you have your cap, your hat, your tag, your blazer, you have your socks, you have the right school shoes on, you're not coming with Timberland boots, you're not coming with belts that are with pants that are tied with wire, you know, all those things, right? It doesn't matter if the uniform is old, but everything's got to be in check. Now, free education, if it is a feasible way, how do we go about it? Because we need to look at the ins and outs, the pros and the cons, and what it takes to deliver free education. So let's start from the beginning. Before we can even think about free education, we first need to think about the economy, right? Does the economy generate trillions of dollars? As it stands, America's economy is about what, 20, 21, possibly $22 trillion annually, followed by China. They say China's about, I think it's like, what is it, 19 trillion? 19 trillion. South Africa, well, South Africa, to be honest, we have a tax base of 6 million taxpayers in South Africa out of a population of 64 million, right? They say there's 64 million people in South Africa. I think there's actually about 65 million. All right. So let's just say 66 million to be quite frank. There's 66 million people in South Africa. Of 66 million people, there's only 6 million paying taxes. So that effectively means 6 million people are carrying the burden of 60 million people. Or of, yeah, 60 million people, right? Is this sustainable? No, it's not. Okay. So of the trillion dollars that South Africa generates annually, that has to be split between different departments, right? And Education, unfortunately, is not top of the list. Education is not priority, right? Is education important? Of course it is. Is it a priority? No, it's not, but it's important. It's not a priority. If you had a budget of, let's just say, the last money that you had was 1 billion rand, and you had to use that billion rand either to secure the country's borders and combat crime and increase weaponry and police responses all within that 1 billion, or would you rather build more schools or develop more schools and get more textbooks and equipment for schools? If you were the president, which one would be your priority, right? So that's the thing. Now that we understand that budget, GDP, economy, priorities, and importance in that order, right? So if we have to really look at it, right, and we understand the nuances beyond um, education and what it requires to give or deliver free education, right, we have to really look at totally utilizing all the possible resources South Africa has at its disposal for us to deliver free education. Because what I think is South Africa is endowed with so many natural resources, right? And minerals. And I feel like South Africa is not utilizing all that it's got in order to increase its GDP per annum, right? If South Africa, if South Africa could, for example, become a manufacturing hub for Africa, Europe, yeah, for Africa and Europe, right? Because I mean, China's really focusing on Asia around, right? If Africa could supply, instead of outsourcing to China, I mean, China things are cheap in China because China just got, but now things are shifting. Things are coming back to Africa. China is now looking at outsourcing. Sorry, China is now looking at outsourcing its manufacturing to Africa now because Africa is a cheaper place, area to manufacture. All this time, China was. Now, Africa is becoming that hub. That's why you see. That's why you see China is building factories all over Africa and the Caribbean because they're looking for cheaper alternatives because their labor market is becoming expensive. As more and more Chinese grow in wealth, the labor market is becoming more expensive as well. People are now charging higher rates. So that needs to change. So they need to move over to Africa and the Caribbean. Now that we figured that out, now that we know that, right? What does it take now for the government to deliver all these things, right? Okay. So, from a student's point of view, it's easy because we just look at governments like they've got money because we see the way they're blowing money, the way they're misusing money, the way they are carelessly throwing money away because it's not theirs, right? That's how we see it. And that's how we know it to be because every other day you're always reading about the misuse of funds, right? By various government departments, right? And that money that they're misusing, like spending 500,000 on lunches and 24 million at the Rugby World Cup final, all those small little monies that we call little monies, right? That is quite a lot. Do you know what 500,000 rand could actually do for 2 or 3 schools, 4, even 5, even 10 schools? Do you know? Do you know that if you gave each township school 100,000 rand and they utilize that, they could actually make huge improvements to the buildings, to their windows, to their flooring, to the toilets, to the whatever. Do you know what 100,000 rand can do to a village rural school? And yet here you have a minister and his family just squandering 100,000 rand, right? Like it's nothing because it's not his. He never worked for it. That is why I always harp on this thing and say, as Africans, besides, I always just say, besides Botswana, who built their country from scratch, every other African country that gained independence have no business running a country. Don't. Just people. I always say, you only know the true value of something if you put blood, sweat, and tears into it. South Africa, we inherited a thriving economy. We inherited blood. We inherited infrastructure. We inherited a whole lot of things that were on the level of Europe and even possibly America too, right? But what do? We wake up in the morning, we are angry at the government for non-service delivery, right? Or municipal services, right? Because they don't come around and collect the dustbins and that. What do? We go and we destroy a mall. We go and we destroy a mall because why? We can. It's because we can. We just can do that. I mean, we have the luxury of destroying infrastructure. So, my question would be to you, would you give a nation free education in good quality schools? And then, when those same students are done studying or while still studying on this free education that you're giving them, they go out and they go and loot and destroy and do whatever it is they need to do, right? That's one aspect. So, free education. Let's start from rooftops because we see governments are squandering money, right? Oh, sorry, I went off on a tangent there, right? So, the squandering money, that money can be better used in school. So, we see the squandering, and then we obviously relate that to, oh, that money could have been better spent elsewhere, right? Like in education. The topic for today could have been spent on education facilities, books, whatever the case may be. Right. That's one. Two, we look at governments spending monies on projects that we feel are less important than education. And we be thinking, why would you be throwing money towards that when education is more important? I mean, let's be honest, right? The defense of a country, that should be top priority. Defense, crime. If you get those two things under control, I think that's the most, I think that's the biggest priority that a government should undertake. Securing the country and containing crime within a country. That's the priority. I think that above all else, right? Second to that, I would think would become obviously the housing of the people, the medical facilities in that order, because it's no use you having big, grand state hospitals, state of the art, and then people got no homes to live in, right? Because there's more healthier people than there are sick people, right? So obviously you're going to take housing into consideration first, make sure that everyone has a roof over their head. Then you'll get into medical, make sure that everyone is immediately taken care of. At least that's my understanding, right? Maybe someone else will say no. Medical facilities are far more important than housing because if you're hurt and hurt, you're not going to fall sick. You can put to makeshift housing, whatever it is, but medical facilities, you cannot just, have a country that doesn't have medical facilities, right? So we can agree to differ on that. Then we see that the government is misusing funds and redirecting it to things that we possibly think that that's not meant to be. That could also go to education, right? So then we look at the cost of what it takes to deliver this free education, right? And then we set a number. We just say in South Africa, free education should be set at least $1 trillion US, right? Now, as a student, we don't care how, where, who gets the money. All we want is free education, right? Now, the government's got to scratch their heads and think, where are we going to get this trillion rand from or $1 trillion from, right? So, like I say, the government has various options. of which they're not exploring at the moment, right? The government, the government needs to turn from a consumer type of government, type of economy, to a producer type of economy. You wouldn't believe to say that in the 80s, early 80s, late 70s, early 80s, China was dead poor. Singapore was like almost sure. I don't know. Singapore was like dead poor too. But if you look at those economies and how they've just transformed, all because of good management, right? So the free education story comes down to the same thing, right? So free education on a physical level needs buildings to be built, desks, students, lighting, pipes, this, that, all the things that are needed to facilitate a building or a facility. That costs money. Secondly, the teachers, lecturers, they need to be paid. That costs money. The running every day, day-to-day running of the facility, just building the facility takes money. The day-to-day running activities of that infrastructure, that facility, that also takes money. Salaries need to be paid. That takes money. Now, from students' point of view, we don't care. We just want the free stuff. Okay. Then we cross over and look over to the Afrikaner side because they have a totally different mindset. They don't believe in free education. They believe you've got to pay your way if you want the best of things. And I think this is a beautiful concept to embrace. If you are South African, we should learn from the Afrikaners because everything that they have, they've built on their own. But most importantly, they have financed it by themselves. You see, finance is key. Funding is key. But the most important proponent of all this is self-reliance. Now, what's the difference between Black people and Afrikaner people? Or let's just say white people. White people work to develop their people, their race. Black people, we work and we get rich and we develop our friends and our family. I mean, if you look at the number of billionaire, rand billionaire, and or dollar billionaire Black South Africans who do not even have the slightest idea of saying, let us build a free vendor college or a university. Let us build a free Xhosa, Zulu, Tswana technical, where our Black students can learn hand skills, not book smarts. Hand skills that you can live off of. Even that is a problem. You see, we have rich people that don't want to part with their monies because they count every cent that they have because it's why? Because it's their money and they've earned that money, right? But when it comes to spending public funds, taxpayers' money, they have no problem throwing it to the prostitutes and throwing it at flights and billion rand and million rand weddings in different parts of the world. I mean, this is ridiculous. Free education is a pipe dream in my view, but it's a reality if you really have to come to think about it. Libya and the Arab states, I mean, they have oil for days. So they're using their oil revenues to provide free education for their students. Right? We have coal. We have coal for the next 500 years. We could dip into our coal supplies. We could supply coal to the whole of Africa and get the money from the coal and put it towards free education. But you know what? Because we are Africans, and as you know, the biggest hindrance, the biggest setback, the biggest pull down of a black man is another black man. You see, as Africans, why would we build a free university for kids? Why would we do that? Why? We don't see the benefit of it, do we? No. Have you seen any black man that you know that has the buying power to buy land and say, you know what? I am going to build 1,000 low cost houses, or I want to build 1,000 low cost houses and remove 1,000 shacks. Guys, this is like 30 years, right? 30 years into democracy. And this economy, some people have eaten. They've made so much money that at this point, it's not even about money for them anymore. It's just about riding the wave of the popularity and of the social status and whatever the case may be. We have people in this country, I'm talking about multi-millionaires, rand millionaires, and some are even probably dollar billionaires. They can afford to adopt a certain township in South Africa. Like these shanty shacks. Like they can actually say, okay, how many shacks are here? There's about 1,000 shacks, right? 1,000 shacks. Do you know that to build I think an RGP house, if I'm not mistaken, I think it's around about 50 or 60,000 rand to build an RGP house. We have people that can either do it on themselves or form a consortium of like 10 mega rich black people. They can come together as a consortium, buy land, and give and build free, low cost housing for about 1,000 people. They can do it, but they won't. You know why? For the mere simple reason that they are black. No other reason. It's just because you are black. There's no other reason. You're just African. Because you are African, we don't do that. We are not going to do it because you're African. So why would we give you free education? Why? Do you get it? That's what I'm saying to you. So if the white people who have the control and the means of production don't even give a free education, why would Africans do it? You understand what I'm saying? Whereas the whites don't do it simply because they believe in self-funding. They want to build things themselves. Hence the creation of an Africans-only university funded by the Afrikaner community. Now you ask a question. How many Zulus are here? How many Zulus are there? How many rich Zulus are there? How many rich Xhosas are there? How many rich vendors are there? How many rich Ndebeles are there? How many rich Tswana, Tsonga, Shangani, rich Pedi? Why can't they come together and build a free university, free college, or free whatever that provides free education for their respective tribes? If you feel because I'm Zulu, I'm not going to build a free university for Tswanas and vendors, I'm not going to do that. So how about we say, okay, we come together, build our resources, and build a free university for our Zulu kids? How about that? No, you won't. You see the dilemma right there. Cool. Guys, let's get into the pros of having free education in South Africa. Hello. People, the concept, the idea of free education is a grand idea. It's a dream come true. It's a pipe dream. It's a dream come true. It's all these things mixed in one. Why? Because there is a possibility that it could be done at certain levels, and there is a plausible cause that it should be done because the funds are there, but the funds are being squandered, misused, and misappropriated, right? Funds that are being unaccounted for. Those are the funds that could actually be set aside for free education. Now, Is free education a good idea? Would the kids appreciate free education? Would free education be as quality as paid education? What are the pros of free education? So the pros of free education is that every child born into a South African family gets to go to school. That is the benefit of free education. Secondly, students that can't afford these expensive courses and whatever it is, they get to also learn at the highest level, at the same level as the kids that have the means to pay their way through. The third benefit of having a free education system is that you increase the chances of the population being literate, right? So most countries have a very low literacy rate because most countries can't afford their children to go to school because it's a paid system. But if you introduce a free education system, you increase the chances of the population getting higher in the literacy game. So I think those are the pros of free education. Next, we get into the cons of free education. And that is a sticking point. Holler. People, the downside and the cons of free education is that it takes a lot of resources, it takes a lot of finances, it takes a lot of um, brain power, manpower to pull off such a huge undertaking like providing free education across the board, right? Rich countries, most rich countries, don't even provide free education, even though they have the money, they have the budget, but they don't. And quite frankly, there's a reason for that. I mean, even if South Africa has the capacity to provide free education, would you value that education if it was given to you for free? I mean, let's be honest. YouTube is basically a free university that anyone with data can access. And even that is not appreciated as much. It doesn't feel like you're going to school. It doesn't feel like you've earned a degree or a certificate. I mean, if a child goes to university and studies every day and gets to wear that gown and earn that certificate, it's like, wow, it feels like you've really worked hard and achieved something great, right? If another child goes to YouTube, learns the exact same thing, gets even better results, and gets a Google certificate or a Facebook certificate or which other certification? There's Coursera. There's what else? I don't know Coursera. There's Coursera. There's online learning. Yeah, I can't remember the other ones, but yeah, there's like about three or four that do like almost free courses, but you don't pay those ridiculous university prices, but it's like a fraction of what you'd pay for those courses, right? It just doesn't feel the same. You as a student, would you appreciate sitting in your room doing a YouTube course, sitting through it, and would you come out proudly and say, well, I've also gone to university, I've studied this, and here's my Google certification? Would it feel the same? So the downside again is like, what do the governments get in return? Because governments are not for profit businesses, but yet governments are for money businesses. So when African governments, like basically the economy is struggling, right? So if you provide free education, even if you could as a country provide free education, what are you getting in return? Because most graduates that actually benefit from a free education stay for the contract period that's required for them to give back, to pay back to the community and pay back to the country if it's service, if it's, I don't know, plus if it's going to be free, you can only repay back in service, right? So let's just say you study to become a doctor for 5 years, then the contract says you must stay in the country for at least 3 years to give back, or stay in the country for 5 years. You studied for 5 years, so it's only right that you pay back for 5 years and then you're free to leave. Would that feel right? Is that a fair deal? It's like you training someone for free and they go give you 5 years and then they go spend the other 50, 60 years servicing Canadian citizens, Australian, UK, American citizens. Is that a fair deal? So there are pros to cons. There are pros and cons to this whole free education thing. Do I personally think education should be free? No, I don't, because I feel education is something that you need to work hard for. You need to earn it. And once you put blood, sweat, and tears into it and you've paid for it, I think that's a more fair, just, and honorable way to do it. If we just issued free education and like you can just drop out whenever you feel like dropping out, you can pick up whenever you pick up, and you can just, I don't know if it if that same certificate will hold the same value as someone who's paid for something. It's almost like clothing, right? If you went out and you bought a Gucci, Louis Vuitton, 60,000, 120,000 rand item, you worked hard for that money. Where someone handed you down a Gucci or a Louis Vuitton. Yeah, both the same product, same color, same everything, but the appreciation, the acquire, the acquiring of that same product is different. So those that scream for free education, ah, man, what do you bring to the table? That's my question. We want it free. What are you going to do to get that free stuff? What are you willing to put on the table? What do you bring? That's just my question. Let me know what you think about this topic in the comment section below. Was I on the money or did I totally miss it with this one? Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel. Hate speech is always welcome. Holler.